For 3 years, she sat there, day after day, rain or shine, just outside the mansion gates. No one knew her name. No one knew her story. But the day the gate finally opened, everything changed. I mean, everything. The road in front of the Ashika mansion was always busy. Honking cars, gossiping staff, and the buzz of the city's elite. But one figure never moved. An old woman, thin, silent, wrapped in faded fabric. She sat beneath a skinny tree like it was her throne or her punishment. She never begged, never waved anyone down. She just stared at the gates as if the building itself owed her something. Some whispered that she was mad. Some said cursed. But she didn't flinch, because the truth was, she wasn't waiting for death. She was waiting for him. Inside the mansion, life rolled on. The staff had learned to ignore her except for Agnes, the youngest maid. She noticed the woman's presence every day, and her silence had started whispering louder than words. One morning, as she took out the trash, Agnes walked up slowly to the woman and said, "Mama, why do you sit here every day?" The woman looked up. "I am waiting," Agnes asked. "Waiting for who?" The woman didn't answer. She just smiled faintly and returned her gaze to the gate. Agnes reached into her apron and pulled out a small parcel of boiled yam. "Here, please, eat something, Mama." She placed it beside the woman and hurried away before anyone saw. On the third floor, in a grand study with high ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows, Derek Ashika signed contracts worth billions of naira. To the world, he was cold brilliance in a tailored suit. But even some men carved from ice may have pasts they might not even know about. An assistant stepped in, whispering, "Sir, that old woman is at the gate again." Derek didn't even look up. "Then let her rot there," he said. It was routine now. He had heard about her before, seen her once or twice from the window. She didn't matter until that day when she did. Ngozi Didi Ashika, his mother, watched everything. She is elegant, powerful, secretive, unbothered. But when her eyes caught the woman at the gate again, her hands trembled. She turned from the window, picked up her phone and made a call. "Make sure she stays away from Derek. He must never speak to her. I don't care what it takes." She said it like she was protecting a legacy, but she was hiding a secret. That evening, Carlo, one of the younger guards, stepped out with a nylon bag. He had seen the woman every day, but today, something in him broke. "Mama, here's puff puff and water. You can't just sit here like this." She smiled softly. "Bless you. May your children never forget you." Carlo said amen and then said, Mama, why don't you leave? This man, Derek, he doesn't know you. He never even looks at you. Mama said, he will one day. And when he does, he will remember everything. From the shadows, Uche, the senior guard, watched in alarm. He yanked Carlo aside. You want to lose your job? Madam Ngozi said no one should touch that woman. No food, no words, no kindness. Instead, we should get rid of her by all means. Why? Who is she? Asked Carlo. I don't know, but whoever she is and whatever she is waiting to say, it is big, and Madame is scared. That night, Derek stepped out of the mansion, phone pressed to his ear. No delays. That Dubai deal needs to close. I don't care. Make it happen, please. His SUV pulled forward, and across the road she stood, not waving, not yelling, just stood slowly, deliberately. For the first time in 3 years, she rose, and for the first time in his life, Derek turned. Their eyes met. A second, a flicker, a thread from another lifetime pulled taut in that moment. He looked away. But she knew the wall was beginning to crack. That night, Derek sat in his massive room, windows open, wind whistling through the blinds. He couldn't sleep. He had negotiated $10 million contract that day, but couldn't shake off the face of a woman with nothing but silence and eyes that looked like they had seen him before he was born. Who are you? Derek pondered in his bedroom. The next day, Derek Asika instructed, see that old woman out there? Make sure no harm gets to her. Carlos saluted his yes, sir. 3 nights later, outside the gate, all was still. The woman sat as always until something changed. 2 figures appeared, silent, careful, dressed in dark clothes. They walked straight toward her. Mama, it is dangerous here at night. Let us help you. I am not leaving. You don't have a choice. She knew danger. She could smell it. But before they could touch her, a voice sliced through the silence. Hey, step away from her. Flashlight, baton, a trembling voice with just enough courage. The man froze, then vanished into the dark. She clutched her wrapper tightly, breathing hard, not from fear, but from recognition that someone wanted her gone. Carlo didn't hesitate. He called Derek. Oga, sir, some men just tried to remove the woman or worse, it's like they wanted to kidnap her. Bring her inside, Derek shouted. Bring her inside. The guards stared as Carlo opened the gate and led her through. For the first time in 3 years, she crossed into the place she once called home. She didn't flinch, didn't marvel. She simply remembered. And at the top of the stairs, Derek waited, arms folded, soul trembling. The gates of steel had opened, but what she was about to unlock would shake everything. From the staircase, Madame Ngozi Didi Asika, in her very expensive gown, swayed as she descended. Her face wore a mask of surprise, but Derek saw something beneath it. Something cold, something calculating. She stopped at the front of the stairs and turned to Kalu. "What is she doing here?" Kalu hesitated, glancing at Derek. Derek's voice was firm. "I asked him to bring her in." Madame Ngozi's fingers curled and twitched at her side, but her face remained calm. She turned to the old woman and said, "Mama, you should not be here. You must be tired. Let me arrange for you to be taken somewhere warm and comfortable." The old woman looked directly at her, and something passed between them. Something dangerous, something unspoken. "I am comfortable here," the old woman said quietly. Derek frowned. He could feel it now, the tension in the room, the way the old woman and Madame Ngozi looked at each other. Something was wrong. Something was hidden, and for the first time in his life, he wanted to know the truth. The room was silent. Madame Ngozi was the first to break the silence. "This is madness." Her voice was smooth, but there was an edge of frustration in it. "Derek, you don't know this woman. She's just a beggar who has been sitting outside our gates for years. Why are you letting her into our home?" Madame Ngozi Didi Ashika stood looking at her. She moved to her to prevent Derek from talking to her. She said, "Derek, we should be careful. Fraudsters are everywhere these days." Then she said, "Oh, let me take you to a warm room." Derek said, "Mom, not yet. I need to talk with her." They all sat down. Yes, she sat down gently, legs aching from years of waiting. Derek watched her like she was a ghost. The old woman didn't flinch. Her gaze remained locked on Madame Ngozi. Derek folded his arm and asked, "But Mom, why does her presence inside here bother you so much?" Madame Ngozi stiffened. "Bother me?" She let out a false laugh. "Derek, I am simply worried about you. Do you know how many dangerous people disguise themselves as beggars? What if she's a fraudster, a 419er? What if she's here to cause trouble?" The old woman finally spoke, her voice steady. "I am not here to cause trouble. I only want to speak." Derek's eyes darkened with suspicion. "Then speak," Derek said. The old woman opened her mouth, then hesitated. She glanced at Madame Ngozi before looking back at Derek. "Not here," she said softly. "Not in front of Madame." Madame Ngozi's face twisted. "Excuse me, you come into my home and now you are saying I can't be here?" The old woman didn't respond. She simply waited. Derek studied her for a moment, and then, without taking his eyes off her, he said, "Mom, please leave us." A flicker of panic crossed Madame Ngozi's face, but she quickly masked it. "Derek, you can't be serious." "I am." Derek's voice was firm, unyielding. "Please, Mom, leave." For the first time in years, Madame Ngozi felt a cold dread creeping into her bones. This was bad, very bad. She forced a smile. "All right, I will leave, but I will be close by if you need me, Derek." She turned and walked out into her room. Derek gestured towards a chair, Sit, please. The old woman obeyed. He sat across from her, studying her features, the wrinkles, the frail hands, the tired eyes, and yet something in those eyes felt unsettling, familiar. Talk, he ordered. The old man took a deep breath. I have watched you for a long time. His fist clenched. Who are you? The old woman exhaled. I am the woman who carried your truth for over 40 years. A strange coldness spread through Derek's chest. My truth? Yes, the old woman leaned forward slightly. The truth about who you really are. Derek's heartbeat quickened. She sighed, rubbing her hands together. I do not know how much you are prepared to hear, but you must understand this. Understand that this is a story of pain, of theft, of a truth that was buried for decades. Derek leaned forward, his pulse pounding. Tell me everything, please. The old woman inhaled deeply. Then, in a voice filled with sorrow, she said, It all began in a house not too different from this one, 45 years ago. I was young when I came to work as a maid in a wealthy home. I had no parents, no siblings. I was an orphan. I was just myself and my dreams of a better life. She paused, her eyes distant. The house belonged to a powerful man and his wife. They were rich, respected, but their marriage was troubled. The wife was barren. The old woman continued, her voice dropping lower. She had prayed and fasted, visited doctors and even native doctors, from different dibyas to babalawos, but nothing changed. No child came. Derek's throat tightened. Something inside him whispered that she wasn't just speaking of any couple. She was speaking of someone he knew. The old woman clenched her hands together and continued. The husband of this woman was not patient. He wanted a child and he was ready to do anything to have one. Her voice became unsteady. One night, he came into my room. I was only a maid, she continued. I had no power, no voice. He took what he wanted from me, and I had no choice but to endure the ordeal. There was silence, thick, heavy silence. Derek's hand gripped the armrest of his chair. She wasn't just telling him any story. She was telling him her story, and it was a story of betrayal and suffering. I became pregnant, the old woman whispered. I did not plan for it. I did not want it, but inside me, life was growing. The wife, my madame, found out. Derek's pulse quickened. She was devastated at first, but then she saw an opportunity. She had no child and had one growing inside me, right inside her house. So she made a quick decision. What decision? Derek asked. The old woman looked him straight in the eyes. She took my child. She waited until I gave birth, then took my baby away from me. She told the world that it was hers. She forced me out of the house and he erased my existence. The old woman's lips trembled as she continued. She had everything, wealth, power, and now my child. But I had nothing. Derek's heart pounded violently in his chest. A child stolen from his mother, a lie to the world, a boy raised in a mansion believing he was born into wealth. He felt dizzy. His mind struggled to reject the thoughts forming in his head, but the pieces were clicking together too perfectly. The old woman stared at him, her eyes filled with sorrow. She saw it. She saw the moment the truth hit him. Derek finally spoke. Who was the child? The old woman inhaled sharply. Her lips quivered as she whispered, You. Derek's world stopped. The word echoed in his mind like a hammer striking an iron. You? He could hear his own heartbeats pounding in his ears. He stared at the old woman, waiting, praying for her to take it back. But she didn't. She simply watched him, her eyes full of emotions. No. Derek whispered, shaking his head. It's impossible. The woman exhaled shakily. It is the truth. No, his voice was firmer now. My mother is Ngozi Didi Asika. She raised me. She raised you, but she did not birth you. I gave birth to you. Derek got up from his chair, his hands trembling. He felt like though the ground beneath him was collapsing. You expect me to believe this? He muttered. You expect me to believe that my entire life, my childhood, my mother, that all these were lies? The old woman swallowed. I never wanted you to find out this way. Derek turned back sharply. His eyes burned with anger, confusion, and something else. Fear. Who are you? He demanded. And what do you want from me? People blackmail me for money. Now what do you really want from me? The old woman's lips trembled. I am your mother, Obinna Derek. The way she said his name, his real name, sent a strange chill down his spine. I gave birth to you, she continued. I carried you in my womb for 9 months. I felt your first kick. I held you when you were born. Her voice broke. And then I lost you. Derek clenched his fist. No, he said again. I was born into wealth. I was raised in this mansion by my mom and my father. Your father was the one who raped me, the old woman shouted back. The words stopped through him. He staggered back a little. She continued. He was desperate for a child, and I was an easy target. When I became pregnant, his wife did not throw me out immediately. She waited. She planned, and when I gave birth to you, she took you from me and then forced me out of the house, telling me I was nothing. Derek felt dizzy. Lies! He wanted to call her a liar. He wanted to scream. But something deep inside of him, something he didn't want to acknowledge, believed her. Why now? He asked. Why come now after all these years? The old woman let out a shaky breath. I came years ago. she says softly. But I was nothing to you than just a beggar outside your gate, just an old woman. You never noticed. A tear slid down her cheek. But I never stopped waiting because I knew that one day you would hear me. Derek squeezed his eyes shut. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Derek paced the room like a trapped animal. His heart was racing. His mind was in chaos. Everything he had known, everything he had believed, had just shattered. He turned sharply to the woman, his breath unsteady. Do you have proofs? His voice was cold, distant, but inside he was anything but calm. The old woman met his gaze, pain flickering in her tired eyes. I have no documents, no pictures. They erased me from your life. Derek clenched his fist. Then, how do I know? How do I believe you? She sighed, reaching for something inside her tattered wrapper. Slowly, she pulled out a small, worn-out piece of cloth, a baby's cloth, faded, old, but embroidered with something. Derek stepped closer. He squinted at the writing. Obina. His body stiffened. It was his name, his real name, not the name Madame Ngozi had given him, not that name he had carried for decades as the son of a billionaire. No, this was his first name, before everything was taken. His throat tightened. His hands trembled as he reached for the cloth. But he pulled back before touching it. No, he whispered. This proves nothing. It's just a name, a coincidence. The old woman swallowed, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Look inside, my son. Have you never felt that something was missing, that something was wrong? Derek's jaw tightened. Something inside him had always felt off. Madame Ngozi Didi had always been overprotective, almost like she was afraid of losing him, afraid of the truth coming out. He remembered his childhood, the way she never let him get too close to anyone outside their family, the way she always panicked when he asked questions about his birth. Has she been hiding something all along? He turned to the old woman. Tell me one thing, he said. Did you ever try to take me back? A tear finally escaped her eyes. I tried, she whispered. I begged. I fought, but they had money, they had power, and I was just a poor girl thrown away like trash. Her lips trembled. They told me if I ever tried to claim you, they would destroy me. So I waited. I waited for you to find me. Derek took a deep breath. If what she was saying was true, then he was a stolen child, a lie dressed up in riches and comfort. He clenched his fist. His so-called mother, Madame Ngozi Didi, owed him the truth, and he was going to get it tonight. Derek stood in front of his mother's bedroom, his heart pounding. Or was she even his mother? His fist clenched at his side. He has spent his entire life loving, respecting, and protecting Madame Ngozi Didi. But now doubt crawled inside him like a disease, eating away at everything he thought he knew. Was she truly the woman who had given him life, or was she the one who had stolen him? He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Madame Ngozi Didi was seated at the edge of her large bed, draped in her signature silk robe. She was sipping tea calmly, as always, until she saw his face. Her hands froze around the teacup. Something in his expression made her go still. "Derek," she said carefully, "what is it?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Who am I?" She blinked. "Who am I?" "Who am I?" she asked again. Madame Ngozi's lips parted slightly, confusion in her eyes. "Derek, what kind of question is that?" Derek stepped forward. "That old woman in there, she told me a story about a young maid who was raped by her boss, about a baby that was taken from her, about a rich woman who was barren and needed a child to call her own." Madame Ngozi was silent. The silence stretched between them for a while, and then slowly she placed the cup on the bedside table. She raised her eyes to meet his, and what he saw shook him to his core. There was no surprise, no confusion, just resignation. Derek's breath came out shakily. "Tell me she is lying," he whispered. "Tell me she is just some mad woman who made up these stories to get my attention and money." "I can't," she said. The room tilted. Derek stumbled back, his head spinning. He felt the walls were closing in on him, like the floor was about to swallow him whole. She wasn't lying. The old woman wasn't lying. Everything she had told him, the pain, the betrayal, the theft of his own existence, was true. His entire life had been a lie. "I did what I had to do," Madame Ngozi said quietly. "What you had to do?" His voice cracked with anger. "You stole me from my mother because she was a maid." Madame Ngozi snapped suddenly, her voice sharp. "She had nothing. What kind of life would she have given to you? Poverty and suffering? Is that what you wanted?" Madame Ngozi took a deep breath, lowering her voice. "You are who you are today because of me, because of us." She clasped her hands together. "Yes, I was wrong. Yes, we lied. But tell me, Derek, if you could go back in history, would you really choose to be the son of a poor maid over the life you have lived, over the life you have now?" He stared at her, his chest rising and falling rapidly. She had just admitted it. She admitted everything. And she wasn't even begging for forgiveness. She was justifying it. Derek turned away. He needed to breathe. He needed to think fast. And one thing was clear. The woman who raised him, the woman he had loved and honored, was not his mother. She was his kidnapper. Derek stomped out of Madame Ngozi's bedroom. His hands were shaking. He had spent 45 years living a lie. The woman he called mother was a thief, a liar, a woman who had stolen him from his real mother and raised him as her own. He staggered down the hallway, his mind spinning. He needed air. He needed to get out of the house. As he reached the grand staircase, he heard hurried footsteps behind him. "Derek! Derek! Please wait! Derek! Please wait!" That was Madame Ngozi's voice. She was desperate now. He clenched his jaw and kept walking. She ran after him, grabbing his arm at the bottom of the stairs. "Please, my son, He ripped his hand away from her grasp. "I am not your son," he said, his voice hard. She froze. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I raised you. I fed you. I clothed you. I loved you." "You stole me," Derek shouted back. He made his voice dangerously low, his fist clenched at his side. "You stole me from my real mother and erased her from my life." Madam Ngozi shook her head frantically. "I did it to give you a better life. I did it because I loved you." Derek let out a bitter laugh. "Loved me? You loved me and stole me. When you see a car you love, you steal it, right? You steal it and take good care of it because you love it." He turned to her fully now, his eyes burning. "If you really loved me, you would have told me the truth. You would have let me decide for myself. Instead, you built my entire life on a lie." She dropped on her knees. Tears streamed down her face as she clasped her hands together. "Derek, please, please don't do this. Don't throw me away." He swallowed hard. This was the woman who raised him. No matter what she had done, he couldn't erase that fact. But at the same time, he couldn't forget what she had done. He couldn't pretend it didn't matter. He looked down at her, his heart heavy. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the door. He didn't look back. He couldn't look back. Outside, the night air was cold against his skin. But it wasn't just the cold that made him shiver. It was the weight of the truth pressing down on him. For 3 years, the old woman had waited at the gate. His real mother. His heart ached. How much had she suffered? How much had she endured the pain, the loss, the agony of watching him grow up from afar, knowing he didn't even know her? All these times, all those times, he had dismissed her as a mad beggar. All those days, he had walked past her without a second glance. All those nights, she had probably cried herself to sleep, wondering if he would ever recognize her. He felt sick, sick with regret, sick with shame. He ran back to his home, back to where he left the old woman, and for the first time in 45 years, he wrapped his arm around the woman who had given him life. She broke down. She collapsed into his arms, crying uncontrollably. Obinna Derek cried too. For the first time in 45 years, she had her son in her arms, and for the first time in his life, Derek felt whole. The world around them has just changed. Nothing else mattered. Only this moment. Only her. Wow. If you enjoyed that story, then we are sure that you will enjoy that next story showing on the screen right now. Please click on the thumbnail and watch the very next story. And please support us by liking this video and share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to our African Folktales ChinChin channel. See you in our next video. Goodbye.